Hey, everybody. You're about to hear a brief retelling of the movie Leave the World Behind. Enjoy watching and subscribe, friends. The Sanford family chooses to take a holiday in New York, so they rent a home on Long Island that is close to a forest. Though the house is lovely, the liquor cupboard is locked. As the family settles in, Amanda, the mother, goes into town to get groceries. She can't help but notice that Danny is packing his vehicle full of things. Afterwards, as the family visits the beach, Rose, the daughter, spots a massive oil tanker ship out in the distance. They don't give it much thought at first, but they quickly notice the ship is getting closer to the shore. As the ship crashes onto the sand, people begin to panic and flee. However, no one is harmed, and the beach is closed for the day. The family discovers they have no service on their phones or televisions and that the Wi-Fi is down when they get home. The presence of some deer in the backyard surprises Amanda and her spouse Clay as well. They see it as a positive omen. Amanda is outdoors in the evening when she hears a disturbance, and then there is a tap on their door. As Clay prepares to combat a possible invader, two individuals startle him by revealing their identities. As it happens, the real owners of the mansion are businessmen George and his daughter Ruth. Amanda communicated with George via email in order to set up the rent. He apologizes for showing up without warning, but all phones are off. They attended the local symphony, and on the way back to the city, there was a complete blackout of electricity. They felt they could remain in this house for tonight because they live on the 14th floor and George has a weak knee. George offers to give Amanda a 50% refund and says he and Ruth can stay in the downstairs guest room because she detests the concept and doesn't trust them. He shows that he possesses the cabinet's keys and unlocks it to get an envelope, while keeping the others from seeing that there's a pistol inside, to establish his identification. He offers Amanda $1,000 as payment in an envelope, but she is still suspicious since she believes he could have the keys because he is the cleaner. Amanda has to be persuaded to give Clay and Amanda a chance. As he tells them the history of this mansion and explains that Danny was his contractor, George distributes the wine from the cabinet. He adds that his wife is abroad on business trips. Amanda stops him to ask for identification, but in the chaos at the theater, George forgot his wallet in his other coat. Because George said he didn't learn about the blackout until later, this makes Amanda nervous. Ruth has switched on the television, and they learn that a national emergency has been declared when they hear the alarm go off. Amanda is now forced to allow the two to remain in the home. It becomes clear that George is aware of something when he and Ruth enter the underground chamber since a customer forewarned him. When Amanda wakes up the following morning, her phone contains 4 emergency messages. 2 discuss the blackout, 1 suggests hackers may be to blame, and the final message is just a string of strange symbols. She wakes Clay awake out of concern so he can read the messages, but they vanish before he can. In search of further information, Clay decides to drive into town and pick up a newspaper. However, because his GPS isn't working properly, he quickly becomes lost. He doesn't hear the car radio go on for a few seconds because he stops the vehicle and exits to see if he can get a signal on his phone. The writer reports that animal migration patterns in the South have been affected by the significant environmental devastation caused by the cyber attack. After failing to make contact on the phone, Clay chooses to continue driving and soon after comes into a woman flailing her arms along the road. Clay stops the car because it appears she needs assistance, but he doesn't understand her because she only speaks Spanish. Her cries startle Clay, so he chooses to ignore her and move on. He accelerates as he spots a drone flying close by and notices red smoke coming from its tail. However, when the drone gets closer, Clay discovers the smoke is really red pamphlets. George, with his rifle in hand, drives out to see the neighbors in the meanwhile. His wife was meant to return by today, but he hasn't heard from her since yesterday, so he is constantly checking his phone. Regretfully, not a single communication has been sent. The neighbor's house appears to be deserted, and the yard is oddly overflowing with unusual objects. He enters since the door was left open and discovers a total mess. When George attempts to use the neighbor's satellite phone, it too doesn't function, indicating that all U.S. satellites are down. He finds an expensive watch in the sand after following the trail after realizing there are other items scattered around the shore as he is about to depart. He stumbles upon the body of a pilot after discovering, to his dismay, that it is an entire arm. He notices a jet crash on the beach as he surveys the area. He hears another jet approaching at that very moment, so he flees and hides inside the home just in time to see this plane crash as well. Rose is quite irritated at home because she wants to watch the Friends season finale, but none of the electronics would turn on. She is startled to discover a large herd of deer in the backyard when she rushes outside. They locate an old shed in the wilderness after she talks her brother Archie into going there. After they enter, Archie informs Rose that someone must be there as they can see her sleeping through the window. Rose understands that Archie is simply playing tricks on her and is shocked, inadvertently hitting her head. While returning to the home, Rose spots another deer and watches as all the birds take off, and Archie is attacked by a bug. Upon his return, George tells Amanda that he had suspected something was up since he noticed unusual activity in the market. Their chat is cut off as he describes what he witnessed on the beach when they hear explosions in the distance, followed by a loud screeching sound that smashes the glass and damages their ears. Amanda runs into the woods right away to look for her kids, but she can no longer stand the cacophony and collapses to her knees in agony. Fortunately, the commotion eventually stops, and everyone returns inside the home. Amanda recalls witnessing Danny's excessive purchases and believes he also sensed something bad was going to happen. At that point, Clay reappears and displays to them a pamphlet that is, ironically, written in Persian. It says "Death to America," as Archie explains, and he recognizes it from war video games. Terrified, Amanda and Clay choose to disregard George's advice and travel to a relative's home in New Jersey. They keep hearing sirens as they go, and ultimately they discover that a group of white automobiles have blocked the route. Amanda investigates further and discovers that no one is nearby. Actually, these are all brand new, self-driving models of the same vehicle. After a while, additional automated automobiles approach behind them. Amanda quickly returns to her family and maneuvers her car to avoid being hit by the fast cars that are obstructing the road. The family leaves as they avoid more oncoming vehicles, and the chaos appears to extend into the city from a distance. George lets the Sanfords stay at the house as they are left with no other option. Archie stays in his room to be mischievous while gazing at photos he shot of Ruth as it begins to rain, but he feels ill and chooses to go to bed instead. Clay accepts Ruth's invitation to smoke with her and says he feels awful for abandoning the unfortunate woman while driving. They find out there are flamingos in the pool when they hear a sudden splashing sound. George shares a drink with Amanda inside, and he confesses. He arrived at this residence on the advice of a prominent Pentagon customer who informed him that a malevolent conspiracy controls the globe. That customer abruptly requested George to reorganize his finances and announced his impending departure, which alerted George to impending events. After realizing that she is sick of hearing about his sad conversations, George brings Amanda into the room where they dance for a bit. Amanda notes that they are intoxicated and have spouses when they embrace too closely. George concedes that nothing has to be done, but he also worries that his wife may have passed away. That's when the shrieking noise starts up again, smashing all the lights and frightening the flamingos away. Every family agrees to share a bed in order to be comfortable now that they must rely on candles for light. They discover Rose is gone and that she could have taken one of the motorcycles the next morning. Archie abruptly wakes up, throws up blood, and has a temperature. He's surprised to see that every tooth in his mouth is falling out when he checks it. Since Archie believes the bug bite is to blame, George offers to take Clay and to throw a prone Archie to see Danny and get medication, while Amanda and Ruth search for Rose in the woods. Ruth and Amanda take a rest in the shed after much searching has yielded nothing, only to get into a fight. They argue because they don't really like one another, but at least by talking about their concerns, they are able to get some understanding of one another. They hear a weird noise at that moment, which suggests that something is moving outside. When Amanda emerges, she finds bike tracks, but before she can pursue them, she hears a disturbance once again and finds Ruth encircled by a herd of deer. Ruth is immediately prompted to shout at the deer by Amanda, who dashes over to her side. When the ruse succeeds and the deer flee, Amanda and Ruth give each other a comforting embrace. When the guys get to Danny's house in the meanwhile, they are shocked to see Danny order them to back off and emerge with a weapon. He says that Archie's illness was most likely caused by radiation from the same noise that occurred in Cuba a few years prior. He believes they are at war since he also knows that the Russians have recalled their people from Washington. But Danny refuses to help them since his first interest is his own family, even if Clay is willing to pay and George is an old friend. He believes they should approach the neighbors, who are said to have a bunker, if they need assistance. They start shooting at each other as George pulls out his gun since he won't go without the medication. In an attempt to put distance between them, Clay acknowledges that he is a worthless guy but begs for the medication while stating that he and Danny share the same goal of protecting their family. At last, Danny grants their request and exchanges the medication for cash. Danny adds further details while Archie is in possession of the medication. The Koreans were responsible for this. Clay retorts by displaying the leaflet as evidence that it is from the Iranians, but Danny has further information. Prior to the phone calls ending, a friend of Danny's in San Diego informed him that a drone had dropped pamphlets there as well, but they were in a language from East Asia, maybe Chinese or Korean. Since the guy is an Iraq War veteran, he would have known if it had been Persian. According to Danny's view, the United States' numerous foes are banding together to bring about the country's destruction. When the lads go back to the car, George acknowledges that Danny's information supports a previous rumor that this is a three-step process used to overthrow a nation's leadership from inside. They first cut off all forms of contact and transportation for the inhabitants. People become fearful as a result, leading to stage 2, coordinated chaos. People will start turning against one another, as Danny did, in order to live, and they won't trust any sources of information, which will be supplied by hackers and other materials like pamphlets. Stage 3 will then naturally occur, with people organizing a coup or a civil war that brings about the nation's demise. George and Clay decide to go to the neighbor's bunker with their families in tow. Amanda and Ruth continue looking for Rose in the woods, but they stop when they see the Manhattan skyline on fire and hear gunshots and explosions all across the city. Rose has been living at the neighbor's home the entire time, it is discovered in the meanwhile. She is now stuffed, but she pauses when she hears her mother shouting her name. She shattered the front door to come in. Rose is ready to leave when she investigates a light that appears to be coming from the basement and discovers an emergency bunker that is fully furnished with everything one could possibly need, including a gym and a greenhouse. Additionally, there is an emergency alert system that advises people to take shelter due to an attack on the White House and other major American cities, which is raising radiation levels in the vicinity of several population centers. Rose finds a large assortment of DVDs, among which is Friends. She picks up the disc and at last enjoys the final episode of her beloved program.